So today I'm reviewing the iPad mini. This is a product that I honestly thought Apple was never going to update. It was sitting in a corner of a dark room for a very long time. They were selling it on their website with no update in sight. And I think the reason why it took so long was because they wanted the hardware and the battery life to catch up. You see, building an iPad Air is easier because you have a bigger chassis, and if the hardware is a bit too fast, you can just cram a bigger battery inside. With the iPad mini, it's a bit tougher to do because the chassis is significantly smaller. The improvements to the A series and the components getting smaller probably made this a better time to do this. And they were able to do so by keeping the same sort of experience as the bigger iPad Air. In fact, the similarities are alike between the two, but there are a couple of key differentiators that make these products a bit different. For the first thing, the Air has a smart keyboard connector, which allows you to connect accessories like the smart keyboard and the Magic Keyboard, but they didn't include it on the Mini. And I think the reason why they didn't is because using a Magic Keyboard on a device this small would feel very awkward. Like, could you imagine typing on a 7-inch or 8-inch keyboard? It just wouldn't be good. Instead, you use Bluetooth and then you can go out and buy a bigger keyboard to use, which would offer a better typing experience. The other thing is the Air has the inferior front-facing camera. It's only 7 megapixels and doesn't support Apple's new center stage. All the other iPads, well, almost all the other iPads do support it. And center stage is pretty awesome. Like, if you're someone who's working from home or if you're someone who's doing a lot of online classes, it makes a big difference on the way people perceive you. It's using the updated 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, so that allows more people in the frame. And if you're just up close and personal, it crops right in. But look how tiny this thing is. Like, you could grip this with one hand, which is something you can't do with the other iPads. You could literally place it in your back pocket, which I've done. I don't suggest you do because it might fall out, but you could. And it just makes it a very light and portable product to carry. For me personally, this is my iPad of choice. Like, if I'm traveling, I don't want to carry a 9 or 10-inch tablet. This is going in my bag. It's small enough that I can carry it, but it's also big enough that I can watch content on it. I do have the cellular model here in a starlight color. It's more of a muted gold with some silver undertones. I quite like it. It's different. You know, it's not as in your face, but it still has like this classy appeal to it. These cellular bands represent that this is the cellular version. If you don't see these bands on it, then that means it's the Wi-Fi model. The other big update was the 12 megapixel wide camera on the back. This is the exact same camera that the Air uses and the exact same wide lens that the new iPads Pro use. Now, the one thing I truly appreciate was the ability to increase the screen size. Like the previous iPad mini only had a 7.9-inch display. This one has been extended to 8.3. The form factor is very similar, except the height is a bit shorter. So again, making it a bit smaller than the previous model, but you get more screen real estate to work with. It's a laminated display. In fact, the only iPad right now that's unlaminated is the iPad normal. And look, it's a great screen. It's an IPS display. It's the same color accuracy and color representation as the iPad Air. It even has the same amount of brightness, 500 nits. So you're not going to see a difference there. But it does have the most pixels per inch. Like, if you're a hardcore pixel peeper and you're trying to read text, this is going to be the sharpest out of all the iPads because they're cramming more pixels in a smaller form factor. Not a big deal, but I still want to point it out. Honestly, one of my favorite features though is being able to use the Apple Pencil 2 with it. Like, it's just such a great note-taking device. I personally wouldn't buy this iPad if you're hardcore into drawing and design. I still think you need a bigger display to do that with. But just for like simple note-taking, just for like bringing this to class and writing down notes, it's perfect, you know? Because like you could use this, you know, watch a presentation, you could jot down some answers and then pull out the pen to write down a quick note, and it works beautifully. I do like the fact that it fits perfectly on the top of the device. Like, I mentioned this in my unboxing, which you can find on my other channel, but it sits nicely in between the cellular bands, so there's some symmetry there. Now, to give you guys an example of how this device looks beside all the other iPads, I have a bunch of them here so you can see for yourself. This is the iPad mini. This is the new iPad with the A13 chip. This is the iPad Pro, which is pretty much the exact same size as the iPad Air. I left the iPad Air at home, unfortunately. And then we have the big boy iPad Pro with M1 chip, the 12.9-inch version. This kind of gives you an idea of how big these displays look beside each other. We have 12.9 inches, 11 inches, 10.2, and then of course on the left hand side we have 8.3. Now, just like the iPad Air, Touch ID has been embedded into the power button, which is at the top right hand corner of the iPad. If you buy a lighter color, it's painted in white, and if you buy a darker color, it's going to be painted in black. It works just like the iPad Air, so you tap it and then it quickly logs you in. Just a quick tip, if you are new to this, you want to bind two fingers. You want to bind the pointer finger on your right hand so that when you're holding it in portrait mode, it can log you in quickly. And you also want to bind it to the pointer finger in landscape mode so that when you're holding it in landscape, you can use your left hand to get you in too. I'm also happy to report that Apple swapped out the Lightning connector for USB Type-C. The only iPad left in the entire lineup with a Lightning connector is the affordable iPad. I mean, this thing needs to go, right? On the iPhones as well. There's no reason for Lightning to still be around. It's slower, it's proprietary, and we could be doing so much more for the environment if we all just used USB Type-C. Now, you do get 4 speaker grills, and you do get 2 speakers. Don't let that fool you. It's still technically only 2 speakers. And the sound quality is better than the regular iPad. It just doesn't get as loud as the regular iPad. Even the iPad Air has a similar amount of speakers, but I found it to get louder. And it's probably because the body of it is bigger, so it can kind of reverberate the sound louder compared to a smaller chassis like this. Now, when it comes to performance, I did a Geekbench test between all of these devices just to see what's going on there. And of course, as expected, the M1 iPad Pro has the best performance out of them. But it was very interesting to see the new A15 that's inside the iPad mini almost match the A14 inside the iPad Air. I have a feeling it's going to be a faster result on the iPhone 13s. My gut feeling is they reduced the performance to keep it in line with the Air so that the experience is very similar, or they might have reduced the performance in order to conserve battery life. But the jump based on these two results from the A14 to the A15 is very minor. And quite frankly, these benchmarks truly mean nothing. Like, I use an A13 and it feels just as fast as a lot of these other iPads, and I highly doubt anyone out there will be able to tell the difference in terms of performance between the Air and the Mini. Now, if you're a gamer, it's still using a 60 hertz display. I would have loved to have a higher refresh rate. That's still reserved for the more expensive iPad Pros, but because you have such a portable device, it's kind of nice just being able to pick up your Xbox controller, jump on Xbox Game Pass, and have a screen to utilize. So that's pretty much it for the iPad mini. Some nice, really cool updates. My personal favorite iPad, but I still recommend the iPad for most people. For $329, this is still Apple's best tech deal. It's fast, it has a good display, even though it's unlaminated, it has good battery life, and it's such a key component for a household. The only thing I wish Apple did was add multi-user support. Because this sits in the living room of my home, my daughter picks it up, my wife picks it up, my son picks it up, and it'd be really nice just to be able to swap in and out of different user profiles. Fun fact, if you buy the 256 gigabyte version of the regular iPad, it's still cheaper than the entry-level iPad mini. Now, should you buy the iPad mini or the iPad Air? And I think that comes down to one thing specifically. Do you need a keyboard, and how much do you travel? If you're someone who just wants to carry this as a second device, the iPad mini makes a lot more sense. If you're using it as your main computer, you're going to be typing a lot of emails on it, and it's not going to be your main consumption device, then the iPad Air makes a lot more sense too. As for the iPad Pros, I think you know who you are. You're very specific in the type of work you're doing, and you might need that extra processing power. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.